When I opened the box, I swear the toy looked back at me. It sat there under the dim glow of my desk lamp, half buried in a nest of cheap bubble wrap and yellowed newspaper. Its button eyes, cloudy with age, but still watching. The edges of its felt were frayed, little tufts of stuffing peeking through seams I recognized instantly. My breath hitched because this wasn't just any toy. This was mine, my childhood companion, the one I lost decades ago after nights of clutching it through thunderstorms and whispered nightmares. I lifted it carefully, almost reverently. Its tiny stitched arms dangled with that same awkward tilt, the smile sewn too wide, too forced, like whoever made it hadn't decided if it was supposed to be comforting or unsettling. And then, just for a second, I froze. The thing was warm. Not just sat in the sunlight warm, this was body heat. I rubbed my thumb across its faded fabric, expecting dust, expecting rot, but instead, I felt a strange smoothness, like skin hidden beneath the stitches. My stomach turned. Nostalgia is supposed to comfort you, right? It's supposed to wrap around you like a blanket from a better time. But nostalgia doesn't pulse. Nostalgia doesn't make you think for a fleeting moment that you felt a heartbeat against your palm. I laughed nervously, told myself it was nothing. Maybe the package had been sitting somewhere hot. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. But deep down, even then, I knew better. Because when I leaned in, inhaling that faint scent of old fabric and dust, something sharper cut through. The scent of something familiar. Something like skin that had been pressed against mine as a child, the faintest trace of sweat and warmth. I set it on my desk and took a step back, watching. The room was silent, but I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone anymore. Its glassy button eyes seemed to glint at angles that didn't make sense, like it was shifting subtly when I wasn't looking. I told myself it was just nostalgia, just the tricks of memory filling in gaps time had carved out. I even whispered aloud, "It's just a toy." But when the words left my mouth, I could have sworn something whispered them back. That night, as I tried to sleep, the memory of holding it wouldn't leave me. Nostalgia, I reminded myself, nostalgia explains everything. But then again, nostalgia doesn't whisper your name at night. When I was a kid, I didn't go anywhere without that toy. It wasn't flashy or expensive, not the kind you'd see in a store window with kids begging their parents to buy it. It was plain, even a little ugly compared to the bright plastic and battery-powered toys my friends had, but it was mine. My grandmother had given it to me, claiming it was special, though she never explained why. I used to drag it everywhere. School trips, car rides, even into the backyard when I wanted to play explorer. The fabric would pick up dirt and grass stains, but I didn't care. To me, it wasn't just a toy. It was a companion. I'd talk to it in whispers at night, telling it secrets I'd never dare tell anyone else. Things like how I hated the sound of my parents fighting through the thin walls, or how lonely I felt when nobody at school invited me to play. It was patient, always listening with that stitched smile, and sometimes when I pressed it close against my chest, I'd swear I heard something, like a soft hum, almost a purr, though I always chalked it up to my imagination. Kids believe in magic, after all. The toy had quirks, though, little things that I thought were normal then, but unsettle me now. Sometimes I'd wake up to find it lying on the floor, even though I was certain I had fallen asleep clutching it tight. Other times I'd wake in the night and its button eyes would catch the light from the hallway in a way that made them glimmer, like it was aware. Once I even swore I saw its stitched hand twitch, but I was young and kids make up stories to make their world more exciting. At least that's what I told myself. The day it disappeared is burned into my memory. I was 9. I'd taken it to the park, tucked carefully into my backpack. I remember sitting under the swings, tracing its stitches with my finger, while other kids ran, screaming with laughter. At some point, I left it sitting on the bench beside me to grab a drink from the water fountain. When I came back, it was gone. Just gone. I tore the park apart looking for it, cried until my throat burned. My mom told me someone probably picked it up, mistaking it for trash. My dad snapped that I was too old to be carrying it around anyway. But the thing is, I didn't just lose it, because I swear I saw something strange before it vanished. A blur at the corner of my eye, a shadow slipping behind the trees. I told myself it was just another kid running by, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. And here's the part I never told anyone. Not my parents, not my friends, not even years later when it could have been laughed off as childhood paranoia. The night after it disappeared, I woke up to a sound, a scratching, faint but insistent, like little fingers dragging along my window pane. I sat up, heart hammering, and I swear I heard a muffled voice. My name, whispered from the dark outside. I never saw anything, but I remembered the terror. I buried myself under the covers, too afraid to move, convinced it was the toy calling me back. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just grief and imagination. I grew older, stopped talking about it, stopped letting myself believe in strange things. I built a life where toys didn't matter, where childhood fears stayed buried. And yet, decades later, there it was, staring back at me from an eBay listing. The same frayed stitches, the same too wide smile, the same eyes that, even in a photograph, seemed to know me. I wasn't even looking for it. That's the part that makes my skin crawl the most. I was up late, half asleep, scrolling through eBay like I sometimes do when I can't get my brain to shut off. Old baseball cards, vintage VHS tapes, random junk people dig out of their attics. It's mindless, comforting, nostalgia without consequences. Then, buried 3 pages deep in the vintage toys category, I saw it. At first, I thought my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. A grainy photograph, poorly lit, with the toy slumped in the center of the frame like the seller couldn't be bothered to make it look appealing. But I knew. The crooked smile, the mismatched buttons, the fraying seams along the arms. It wasn't just a toy. It was my toy. I clicked. The listing title was plain. Used toy, well loved. No brand name, no date, nothing that would catch attention. But the description was what unsettled me most. It read, "It always comes back. For those who lost it once, it finds its way home." That was it. No dimensions, no shipping details, no attempt to make it sound collectible. Just those words. I felt my throat tighten. It always comes back. Who would write that? Curiosity tangled with dread, and I scrolled down to check the seller's profile. They had no feedback, no ratings, no username I recognized, just a string of random numbers and letters like something auto-generated. And the account had only been created a week before. Still, I couldn't stop staring at the picture. The quality was awful, like it had been taken with a flip phone camera, but the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. The shadows in the room didn't seem to fall naturally. The toy's button eyes glimmered faintly, even in the blur. And though the head tilted slightly to the side, I could swear the expression was sharper, the smile wider than I remembered. I almost clicked away. Almost convinced myself it was just a weird coincidence, another copy of the same toy, forgotten by time, resurfacing in some stranger's attic. But then I noticed it. the detail that froze me in place, that made every hair on my arm stand on end. On its left cheek, just below the button eye, there was a faint scratch. Jagged, shallow, like a scar in the fabric. A mark no one else would have cared about. A mark I remembered making. When I was a kid, I got angry one night after my parents' fighting woke me up again. I threw the toy against the dresser in frustration, and when I picked it up, there it was, that scratch, my scratch. This wasn't just a look-alike. It was the same toy, the one I lost, the one that whispered my name outside the window. And now, it was for sale. The package showed up faster than I expected. No tracking updates, no warning. It was just there one morning, waiting on my doorstep like it had delivered itself. The box was plain, brown, and unmarked, but the moment I picked it up, something strange struck me. It was warm. Not in the way cardboard feels after sitting in the sun. This was a steady, almost body-like warmth that seeped through the tape and straight into my palms. I carried it inside, trying to laugh it off. Maybe the delivery truck's heater had been blasting. Maybe I was imagining things. But when I set it on the kitchen table and cut the tape, the smell hit me. Metallic, sharp, unmistakable, like blood or rust. I froze. Who ships a toy in packaging that smells like that? Peeling back the cardboard, I found layers of old newspaper instead of bubble wrap. Pages yellowed with age, some torn, some stained with watermarks that looked uncomfortably like fingerprints. My pulse quickened as I pushed the crumpled paper aside. And then I saw it. The toy. For a moment, it really did feel like time collapsed. My childhood came rushing back. The nights I used to curl up with it, the way I used to whisper secrets into its stitched ear. But that warmth didn't feel like nostalgia. When I lifted it out, the fabric pressed against my skin was alive. Not soft, not cold from storage. Alive. It looked older, yes, but eerily preserved. The colors have faded, the seams frayed, yet the stuffing felt as firm as the day I lost it. The button eyes caught the dim kitchen light, glinting with something that almost resembled recognition. I turned it over in my hands, and that's when I noticed it. Its smile was wider. Not dramatically so, just a fraction of a curve more. Enough that I couldn't convince myself it was the same as before. The box had one more surprise waiting. Beneath the newspapers, tucked flat against the cardboard, was a single folded piece of paper. My stomach dropped before I even opened it, as if I already knew. The note was typed, not handwritten, just one line. Take care of it this time. No signature, no return address, just that command. I dropped the paper on the table, heart pounding louder than I could hear it in my ears. That night, I tried to rationalize it. I told myself people say creepy things online all the time. Maybe the seller thought they were being funny. Maybe this was just a coincidence layered on top of a coincidence. I placed the toy on the dresser across from my bed, forcing myself to believe I could sleep with it in the room. But when I woke up the next morning, the toy wasn't there. It was sitting on my desk instead, and I hadn't moved it. Each night, I placed it deliberately on the dresser. Each morning, it was somewhere else. On the windowsill? Propped against the closet door? Once, sitting perfectly upright in my desk chair, as if waiting for me to come home. I laughed nervously into the empty room. Okay, funny prank, subconscious, real creative. But the laughter never lasted. It dried out in my throat, leaving behind only the sound of silence and the quiet, unnerving certainty that something else was in control. The noises started small. At first, it was just creaks on the floorboards, the kind old houses make when they settle. Except the steps had rhythm, light, deliberate, not the heavy groan of wood adjusting, but the soft patter of footsteps. Too small for an adult, too quick to belong to me. One night, half asleep, I swore I heard the faintest dragging sound, like fabric brushing across the floor. I snapped on my bedside lamp so fast I nearly broke the switch. The toy was right where I'd left it. Still, I couldn't shake the thought, what if I'd turned the light on 1 second too late? I tried to convince myself it was stress. Stress makes people see things, hear things. It's just stress, right? I muttered out loud, pacing the bedroom, clenching my fists. Just stress. Dark humor became my shield. I started calling the toy roommate. I'd look over at its shifting positions and quip, "Oh, you like the view from the window, huh? Rent's due Friday." But sarcasm only worked for so long, because then came the whispers. The first time, I thought it was the radiator, a low hiss, nothing more. But as night stretched on, the sound grew sharper, threading syllables into the dark. Not full words, just the shape of them, like lips brushing against the edge of language. My name was buried in there, I'm sure of it. I lay frozen under the blanket, every muscle locked, eyes squeezed shut. By the 5th night, denial became impossible. I woke with the sensation of breath against my ear, warm and damp, and I swear I heard it, soft, playful, unmistakable, a giggle. That sound snapped every thread of pretense. The humor vanished, the rationalizations crumbled. Nothing human was in that room but me, and yet I wasn't alone. I sat up in bed, shaking, staring at the dresser. The toy was gone. My gaze darted to the shadows, to the window, to the chair. Anywhere it could have been. I found it finally at the foot of my bed, upright, facing me. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I expected to feel it crawling closer, hear that awful little laugh again. That was the last night I ever truly slept. At first, I thought the whispers were just gibberish, scraps of sound stitched together by an anxious brain. But then, they began to form words. And not just words, phrases, familiar phrases. One night, as I lay rigid in bed, I heard it clearly from across the room. "Tag, you're it." My blood went cold. I hadn't heard those words in that exact tone since I was 7, playing hide and seek in the basement with the toy clutched tight in my arms. Back then, it was my partner in crime, the one I tapped lightly before sprinting away. No one alive knew how we played. No one. The next night, it escalated. I was half asleep when the voice slithered through the dark, faint but precise. "Why did you leave me in the basement?" I sat bolt upright, heart hammering, throat dry as sand. Basement. The word carved through me like ice.
because that was exactly where I'd last seen it, before it vanished, lying on its side against the damp concrete floor, right after my parents had another screaming match upstairs. I'd hidden down there to escape the sound, clutching the toy until it felt like my only anchor. Then I left, slamming the door behind me. I never saw it again. No one else could have known that detail. I never told anyone, not my friends, not my parents, not even myself when the memories got too heavy. The toy remembered. Each night, its whispers became bolder. Echoes of my childhood unfurled like poisoned roots. The songs I hummed while curled under the blankets, the secret phrases I'd whispered to it when I was too scared to sleep. And then came the arguments. Not just mine, theirs, my parents'. Their words spat in anger, twisted through the toy's voice. Hearing them again in the middle of the night, warped and rasping through fabric lips, was worse than any ghost. "You'll never amount to anything. Why can't you just behave? Don't cry. You don't dare cry." I pressed my hands over my ears until my skull throbbed, but the words bled through. They weren't just sounds, they were memories, forced back into me by something that should have been lifeless. That's when I began to wonder, if it remembered me, did it also remember them? Did it hold on to every moment it ever witnessed, every scream, every secret? Was it some kind of archive? The thought sickened me. One night, I tried to confront it. I turned on all the lights, set the toy on the bed, and spoke directly to it, like a lunatic. "What do you want from me?" My voice cracked in the silence. "Why now?" It tilted forward slightly, like gravity had nudged it, but there was no draft, no movement. And then it whispered, soft as silk.
No answer, just the rustle of fabric, the faint smell of mildew, and something metallic, like rusted iron. That night, I dreamed of the basement, the same cracked floor, the same damp walls, and the toy sitting exactly where I'd left it. Only this time, when I turned to leave, it followed me up the stairs. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, and on the pillow beside me, perfectly upright, was the toy. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just nostalgia. This wasn't just some haunted object dragging itself back into my life. It was something else, something that had been waiting. And then the final blow. As I sat trembling in the half-light of morning, staring at its stitched smile, the toy whispered again. But this time, the voice was different, higher, softer, laced with tenderness I hadn't heard in years. "Pumpkin." I nearly fell out of bed. My chest clenched so hard I thought my heart had stopped. That nickname, that was hers, my mother's. But my mother had been dead for years. I stopped inviting anyone over. Not that it mattered. My friends had already started pulling away. At first, I tried to explain it, casual, almost joking. "Hey, weirdest thing happened. Remember that toy I used to have? Yeah, I found it on eBay, and now I swear it talks sometimes." I said it with a laugh, waiting for their curiosity to spark, for someone to ask, "Really, can I see it?" Instead, the replies were polite chuckles, quick subject changes. One friend finally said, "Man, you've been working too hard. Stress messes with your head. Take a break." Another sent me a link to some meditation app, like I was just one deep breath away from sanity. No one believed me. That was the first cut. The second was realizing I didn't want them to come over anymore. What if the toy decided to perform? What if it whispered one of those old, poisonous phrases with someone else in the room? Worse, what if it went silent, leaving me looking like the unhinged one? So I withdrew. I told myself I was protecting them, but the truth was uglier. I was ashamed. And that's when the house started changing. It began with the locks. I would double-check the front door before bed, tugging hard to be sure it latched. But in the morning, it would stand slightly ajar, the chain dangling loose. The back door, too, sometimes wide open, sometimes just unbolted, as if someone had tested it and left. I installed new locks, changed the bolts, even nailed one shut. Still every morning, the same thing. Then came the noises. I live in an old place. Creaks are normal, groans even. But these weren't the random sighs of timber and pipes. These were deliberate, rhythmic, taps along the hallway as though tiny feet were pacing when I tried to sleep. Scratches just underneath the couch where I sat, low and steady, like nails dragged across wood. One night, my neighbor knocked. She frowned, said she'd been hearing childlike laughter through the walls at odd hours. She asked if I'd been babysitting. I forced a laugh, told her she must have been dreaming. She didn't press, but I saw the suspicion in her eyes. I know what you're thinking. I sound paranoid. I sound like one of those narrators who loses touch with reality and drags you down with them. Believe me, I thought the same. I told myself it was stress, lack of sleep, isolation playing tricks on me. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. But the toy wouldn't let me. Every time I tried to ignore it, shove it in a drawer, bury it beneath clothes, it found its way back, sitting on the dresser, perched on the couch, once even placed delicately in the center of my bed, always upright, always watching. I almost laughed at myself, almost, until the air shifted, thick and heavy, the way a room feels when someone steps inside. And then it happened. Not a flicker, not a trick of shadow. The toy moved. Its head turned. There comes a point where fear turns into fury. You can only live with a knife in your chest for so long before the pain curdles into rage. That's where I was the night I decided I wouldn't tolerate it anymore. I'd caught it moving. I'd seen the head turn, the faint plastic squeak of its joints flexing where no string or motor should exist. It was no longer a suspicion, it was fact. And if it was alive, then it could be destroyed. That was the thought that looped through my head, reckless and desperate. Everything dies, everything burns, everything breaks. So I started with fire. I dragged the toy into the kitchen, slamming it down on the stove like an offering to some unholy altar. Its glassy eyes reflected the flame as the burner ticked, then roared to life. I shoved it against the fire, holding it there with trembling hands, waiting for the plastic to bubble, melt, deform. But nothing happened. No, that's not right. Something happened. The flame bent as though recoiling from it. Heat radiated back at me, singeing my knuckles, but the toy sat untouched. Its painted smile seemed wider in the orange glow, mocking me. I threw it into the oven, cranked the dial to broil, and waited until the metal racks glowed red. I let it cook for an hour, choking on the metallic stench of heat. When I yanked the door open, ready to find molten ruin, the toy sat there pristine, cheerful, as if I'd just placed it moments before. I screamed, I tore it out and hurled it across the room, watched it crash into the tiles. It landed neatly, upright, staring. Fine, if fire was useless, I'd break it apart myself. I grabbed the heaviest knife I owned, raised it high, and brought it down with all the force in my arm. The blade glanced off like I'd struck steel. Sparks flew, metal ringing, my hand going numb from the recoil. I tried again, harder, screaming through gritted teeth. Again, each strike ricocheted off, gouging my countertop, shattering the blade tip. The toy didn't even wobble. My fury grew manic. I swung a hammer until my shoulders gave out, until the head of the hammer split and clattered uselessly across the floor. I dragged it outside, into the driveway, and dropped it beneath the tires of my car. I started the engine, floored it, reversed, floored it again. The tires squealed, rubber burned, the smell of asphalt filled the air. When I staggered out, panting, the toy sat between the tread marks, untouched, not a scratch. I kicked it, screamed until my voice broke, threw it into the garbage bin and slammed the lid. My chest heaved. My throat was raw. My body shook with the weight of futility. And that's when it spoke again. Not the whispers, not the childhood echoes. A full sentence, clear, deliberate, vibrating in the hollow night. It said, "You left me once." Its voice was small but steady, a child's voice with edges of accusation. "You won't leave again." I froze. My knees nearly buckled. I ripped the lid off the bin, stared down into its plastic grin. Something inside me cracked. This wasn't just about a cursed toy anymore. This wasn't random. I thought back to the seller's email. Take care of it this time. What did that mean, this time? And the listing itself, that strange description, it always comes back. My thoughts spiraled, panic and paranoia entwining like barbed wire. What if this wasn't unique?
The second listing burned in my vision like a brand. I refreshed, hoping it would vanish, dissolve into some glitch. It didn't. The toy stared back through the pixels, just as it had stared at me in my kitchen. I clicked the seller's profile. Blank, no avatar, no bio, just a string of numbers and letters. Nonsense, like a keyboard smash. They'd been a member for over 20 years, with hundreds of sales, but every review was gone, wiped clean. That should have been impossible. I dug deeper, desperate, clicking links, copying the username into search engines, scraping every result. And that's when the trail began to appear like faint bloodstains under ultraviolet light. Old forums, dead message boards, forgotten corners of the internet that felt like opening tombs, threads with dates stretching back decades, preserved only by web archives. Each one had the same story, told in jagged, paranoid posts. I bought something from them. It wasn't right. It moved. I keep hearing it at night. My wife says I'm imagining things, but she doesn't hear it calling her name. And then the posts would stop. No follow-ups, no conclusions, just silence, like the users had been erased mid-sentence. One archived page in particular made my stomach clench. The thread was from 2007, under a long-dead horror forum. The title read, "Do not buy anything from username." The first comment was still intact, though half its images were broken links. If you're reading this, it's already too late. I froze, staring at the words. The page flickered once, like it didn't want to stay open, and I could swear I heard the faint whine of static from my speakers, even though no audio was playing. Scrolling further, I found screenshots posted by other users, grainy, corrupted, half of them unreadable, but one showed enlisting almost identical to mine. The same toy, the same flat background, the same chilling caption. "It always comes back." And then another, and another. Different toys, same seller. A rag doll, a wooden clown, an old music box, all described as returning. My breathing turned shallow. My head spun with the implication. Whoever this seller was, they weren't just peddling cursed antiques. They were spreading them, dispersing them like seeds, planting them in people's homes, letting them take root. I should have stopped, closed the laptop, walked away, but I couldn't, because under every archived warning, every corrupted screenshot, there were names of buyers, people like me. I recognized one. It was a username I'd seen years ago on a subreddit I used to lurk. They'd written horror stories back then, creepy tales that seemed too vivid, too personal. Everyone thought they were just good at roleplay, but their account had gone silent, vanished. The idea clawed at me. What if those stories had been real, warnings disguised as fiction? I leaned closer to the screen, scrolling further, chasing scraps like a starving animal. My eyes ached, my hands trembled, and then, ting! The email notification popped up. Sender, the seller. Subject line, take care of it this time. My blood iced. I clicked before I could think. The email was short, plain, like it had been waiting for me. You left it once. You won't leave it again.
Don't make the same mistake they did. And below that, my address. Not just the city, not just the street, the full thing, apartment number included. I sat there frozen, staring at it, my mind scraping against itself like metal on metal. My throat tightened until I couldn't breathe. The toy was still in the house, and now I knew someone, somewhere, wanted it to stay that way. I told myself it would be the last night. One way or another, this would end. I locked every door, every window. I slid heavy furniture against the entranceways until the apartment felt like a barricaded bunker. My phone was on record. My laptop camera was live. I set up the cheap motion detector I'd ordered overnight. If anything moved, I'd know. But the problem was, I already knew. The toy didn't hide anymore. It didn't pretend.
That night, as the clock blinked past midnight, I heard it pacing, little deliberate footsteps against the hardwood, not random creaks of an old apartment. Footsteps, heel to toe, measured, patient. I sat in the dark with a knife trembling in my grip. The cameras showed nothing, just empty hallways and shadows. But my ears told a different story. "Come back," it sang in that warped, childlike voice. "Come back and play." The hallway light flickered, once, twice, and then it stayed out, plunging everything into a smear of black. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stand, every muscle screaming against the idea. My phone buzzed in my hand, and when I looked, there were motion alerts, dozens of them, from every camera at once. But on the feeds, nothing, just static, creeping at the edges, like something was too close to the lens to be seen. That was when I saw it. 2 small pinpricks of red light, hovering in the dark like glowing eyes, loaded the ground, unblinking. I froze, knife clutched so tightly my hand went numb. The toy giggled. It was the sound of childhood joy, but slowed down, twisted, bent into something jagged, like a recording dragged backward across broken cape. I whispered, barely able to form the words. "What do you want from me?" Silence. Then, softly, like breath against my ear, even though the hallway was empty, "You." I stumbled back, tripping over the couch, my chest heaving. I aimed the knife at the dark, but the eyes were gone. Just the endless void of a hallway that now seemed too long, too hungry. I turned the camera on myself, pressing my face close because some part of me needed someone out there, anyone out there to hear this. If you're watching this, if you're hearing me, please don't buy it. Don't search for it. Burn the listing. Report it. Do whatever you can because it doesn't stop. It won't stop. Not until... A crash cut me off. Kitchen. Plates shattering like a bomb went off. I spun around, the knife slick in my hand.
My own reflection stared back at me from the black window glass, eyes wide, sweat dripping down my temple, and behind me, just for a second, I swore I saw its silhouette, small, still, waiting. I lunged, swinging wildly, slashing at empty air. The knife clanged against the wall. Nothing was there. Nothing but the faint smell of metal and ash, sharp in my lungs. My phone buzzed again. Another email. Same sender. No subject. Just one line. You can't destroy what remembers you. My knees buckled. I pressed my forehead against the wall, shaking, somewhere between sobbing and laughing because it all felt inevitable now, like the story was already written and I was just catching up to the last page. I forced myself back to the camera one last time. My voice cracked, broken, but I needed to leave something behind. Maybe you can stop it. Maybe if you find the listing before someone else does, you can burn it. I couldn't. God help me, I couldn't. But if you... The feed hissed with static. I whipped around. The toy was standing in the doorway now. No attempt at hiding. Its head tilted, plastic smile wide, eyes glinting with a light that wasn't light at all. It took a step forward, then another. Tiny shoes tapping rhythmically against the floor, each sound slicing through me like a blade. I dropped the knife. My body refused to move, as if my muscles understood what my mind didn't want to admit. There was no fighting it. The last thing I remember saying, barely more than a whisper, was please. And the last thing I heard, before everything cut to black, was its voice. Clear, confident, no distortion this time. Found you.